Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be exploring my first experiences and impressions of playing Black Desert Online. I've been playing it pretty intensely the last couple of weeks, and I can begin to feel myself transitioning away from that honeymoon new player experience into longer term mid-game. Before I forget what it means to be a new player, I wanted to share those experiences and impressions with you all. This won't be an in-depth review, for the simple reason that I'm no expert. I'm still a new player. It's not really the point of this video. I feel like many of the reviews out there try and encompass the entire breadth and depth of the game, but for Black Desert, which is so deep, it can be very difficult to relate those reviews to what you might actually experience in your first couple of weeks of playing. But that's what I hope you'll have at the end of this video, a reasonable idea as to what you might expect to experience in your first couple of weeks of playing the game. The first thing you'll notice when playing the game are the visuals, and as you can see, the game looks absolutely fantastic. I have it on the maximum graphics settings at the moment, but even on the lower settings, the game looks brilliant. It runs really well as well. I've played MMOs that are significantly older and look far less impressive and struggle to get half the frame rate that I'm able to achieve on Black Desert, especially when I play on a slightly more realistic setting. One of the things that you may notice, especially on the higher settings, is that it can actually be quite difficult to see detail. If I look towards the sun, the sky can be incredibly bright. And as soon as I move into the more shadowed areas, my character can become a black silhouette. And this becomes even more prominent at night when the sky gets dark, where the sky is still simultaneously really bright, even though it's night, and the world around you gets very dark and can be very difficult to see what's going on. This isn't necessarily a question of brightness settings either, as by changing the settings you'll just be emphasizing either the very bright sky or the very dark world. You do sometimes get the impression that the higher settings are more about being able to take good screenshots and pretty looking videos than necessarily focused on gameplay. Once you begin combat at first as well, you'll notice that the skills absolutely dominate the screen, although they do look fantastic. Just bear in mind that it might be a little overwhelming at first trying to understand what's going on when your screen is just filled with these very pretty looking effects. I know that some people can find the game a little grainy to play and aren't a fan of the style, but at the end of the day this is just a question of taste. It's not a problem I have at all. Whether it's your style or not, you can't help but admire how good Black Desert looks, especially in comparison to the other major MMOs which are out there right now. Just bear in mind that you might need to play around with the settings a little bit to find a look that works best for you. Let's talk about the combat. The combat in Black Desert Online is one of the selling points, and it is incredibly fun and satisfying. Gone are the days of the slower paced, tab targeted MMO. The way that it works is that you press different combination of keys on your keyboard and mouse, and you'll do different skills as a result. For example, backward F does one thing, shift forward does another, left click, down left click, shift and Q. All of these different buttons do different things. And you can combo these different abilities in different ways and in beneficial ways. If you're intimidated by that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The combos are not particularly complex. And the game does a reasonably good job of introducing you to different combos as you're playing the game and leveling up. Now, the feel of combat in Black Desert is actually quite different from normal MMOs. You certainly don't have quests that ask you to kill 8 boars. Instead, the quest will ask you to kill 50, 100, 300, even 500 enemies. The combat is all about killing large groups of enemies as quickly as you can. And something that you'll experience as a new player is that you will typically be overleveled because the game wants to get you to this higher level quickly, and therefore you won't particularly find any challenge in the combat. There's certainly no risk of death. However, that's okay, that's not something that bothered me, for the simple reason that the satisfaction of the combat in Black Desert isn't about defeating one challenging enemy, it's more about the satisfaction of absolutely destroying a large group of them, and the fact that you are overleveled doesn't necessarily impact that feeling very much. So, if you're looking for a change of pace, away from the Holy Trinity and into a more action-based combat system, Black Desert is absolutely that for you. If you are, however, looking for a more traditional game with the Holy Trinity and that element of group play, then Black Desert definitely will not give you this. I personally find it deeply fun and deeply rewarding, It's just so satisfying pressing one button and destroying a group of enemies. As soon as you begin your journey in Black Desert, you'll notice that the game gives you a huge amount of stuff as a new player, the vast majority of which you won't have any idea what it does or how to value at first. Just to highlight this, once you join a guild, you'll have up to 4 daily attendance rewards that you'll get just for logging into the game. Now 2 of these on a weekend you'll actually get 2 items per day, which means that just for logging in once you can get up to 6 items, and these items are typically really good. Now, in addition to this as well, you can see that I have 19 unclaimed rewards here, the majority of which I've earned just for playing the game for a given period of time in one day, and this repeats day in, day out. On the right is a whole list of rewards that I haven't yet claimed, the majority of which I still don't fully understand what they do or how to value. So the game does give you a huge amount of stuff, even if at first you don't really understand what it is or how to value it. It does have value, however, either being a very useful item later on in your journey once you understand what it is, or as a mechanism of selling to other players. A lot of the items that you're given sell for a lot of money. Just to highlight this, if I go into my storage, the majority of this 633 million silver worth of stuff in my storage just comes in for playing the game as a new player. Most of it I haven't earned, it's just been given to me. Now, as a consequence of this, as a new player, it can actually be very difficult to get a good grasp of what is a lot or a little amount of money in the game, because the game just throws so much of it at you at first. When you begin doing your own activities to generate money, it can be quite difficult to evaluate if you're doing a good job or not, if you're earning a lot of money or a little, just because it's difficult to compare it with the amount of stuff you're given for free. A benefit of the huge amount of free stuff, however, is because it's worth so much, that it does get you up to speed very quickly once you begin wanting to spend that on items to get you stuck in the later game stuff very quickly. So it can accelerate you to those later game activities quite quickly. It's a good catch-up mechanic. Now, in addition to just pure money worth of stuff, the game does also give you a huge amount of premium items. It gives you weeks worth of the premium buffs, which give you really good effects and which you normally need to pay for. They sort of act as the monthly subscription of the game, not mandatory, but they do really help. And it also gives you a huge number of premium items that you would normally need to pay for. For example, costumes, it gives you for free and it never used to, as well as pets. Pets are the mechanism which you auto-loot in the game, and as a game that revolves around killing lots of enemies very quickly, not having to pick all of those items up manually is very impactful. So it's very generous that they give you them for free. And a whole host of other items they give you, which you would normally need to pay for. What this means is that you're really treated like a king or a queen when you begin playing the game. You have no reason in your first couple of weeks to touch the cash shop. You're treated so well, you're given everything you possibly need. Now, something to bear in mind is that this is still an Eastern MMORPG, and the cash shop does play a very heavy element. Whether it's pay to win or not, I won't go into that debate, as it's a sandbox game and it doesn't really have an end game, but it's certainly heavily pay for convenience. And although it gives you all of these items for free, do expect that eventually those will dry up. Those buffs will run out, and it'll be up to you to whether to spend real money to continue them or not. You won't have to, but it'll be up to you whether you choose to live without those buffs or with those buffs. This extends beyond other things as well. The pets are a good example of this. It gives you low tier pets at first, which is all you need to auto loot everything as you're leveling up to higher levels. However, once you do hit the higher levels, suddenly all the creatures you fight and you kill begin dropping items, and those pets you're given for free aren't good enough to collect them all. Therefore, you'll need to make the decision of spending real money to gain better pets, so you don't need to pick those up, or just dealing with being slower because you need to manually pick up the items. Whether you're okay or not with the cash shop is going to be up to you. Whether you can live with the pay for convenience, whether you're happy spending that money, whether you're happy not spending that money, that's going to be entirely up to you. Just know that at first you won't need to. You're treated very well. That will, however, eventually run out, and it will be up to you whether to spend real money or not. Let's talk about the experience of leveling and questing in Black Desert Online. Firstly, the main quest is huge, and there are hundreds of other small side quests. So many, in fact, that the game hides the majority of them from you. I can only imagine to stop you being overwhelmed by just how many there are. Now, you don't need to do these side quests, you can just follow the main quest. In fact, just following the main quest will still make you overleveled, as they obviously want to get you to those higher levels quickly. Now, I didn't find that there was an issue being overleveled, because as I said in the combat section, the combat's more about the satisfaction of killing large groups of enemies. The fact you're overleveled wasn't a big deal for me. The rewards of the side quests are valuable at all points in the game, namely contribution XP, so you can absolutely come back and do these side quests later on. Something to note is that the story in Black Desert Online doesn't really exist. Now, this might actually be quite surprising, because the main quest is so big, and there is a huge amount of quest text, but to be honest, the quest text is not well translated from the native Korean, and it's not particularly enjoyable or interesting to read, and there is so much of it. So, truth be told, I pretend that there isn't a story in Black Desert, for the simple reason that if I was to try and understand it all and to read all of those that quest text, I would almost certainly become confused, not particularly interested, and maybe a little bit bored. So, if story is something that is very important in your MMOs, I might consider this before getting stuck in. Something to consider as well as an experience that I had is that because there's so much quest text and because you're skipping through it, and because the main quest is so big and there are so many small quests where you're just talking to NPCs, the game can encourage you almost to rush through those quests, to rush through that text, just in order to try keep the main quest going along at a reasonable pace. It's not a major issue, but it's something that I experienced. What the main quest does do brilliantly, however, is that the main quest gives you direction. It is your vehicle of exploring new areas, exploring new systems, discovering new things. And in a sandbox MMO like Black Desert, this is really important, because there's so many things that you could do. As a new player, there's so many things that you know you could do in the future, but you haven't discovered yet. It can be very overwhelming as to what you should be doing. When in doubt, just follow the main quest. It will give you experience and show you these new things, and can give you direction when otherwise you might be unsure how to spend your time. At the end of the day, treat the side quests as a fun activity that you can do if you want, but you absolutely do not need to. And treat the main quest as a very, very, very long tutorial, tens of hours long tutorial, but it will give you an introduction to everything you need to know about the game. When in doubt, follow the main quest. It has fantastic rewards. It will set you up with items, many of which are premium that you normally need to pay for, and will give you that introduction you need to get going. I want to briefly talk about the way the gear works in the game, as it's quite unique. The first thing to note is that they've separated the visual progression of your character from the gear that you're wearing. How you look is determined by the costume you're wearing, not the gear. Now, it used to be that the only way of getting costumes was through the cash shop. However, they have improved this, and you do get a couple of good looking costumes for free. But it's something to bear in mind that just because you get a really good new piece of gear, that won't translate into your character looking any better. The way that gear works is, at first you will get given better pieces of gear, but come around level 30 it all becomes a game of upgrading gear, not necessarily getting new gear. Now, simplistically, the way the gear works is that you have your attack points, your AP, and your defense points, your DP. Now if we take a quick look at the map, you can see that different monsters have different recommended APs. The higher your stats, the tougher things you can kill, and the better rewards you get from them. If we take another quick look at my gear, you can see that there are different symbols denoting the different levels of upgrades that they have. And come around level 30, you'll get given this Naru gear that you can upgrade with beginner upgrading items to sort of get you into the system, that get you up to the higher levels and get you started and get you going. It's worth noting that this upgrade system is an RNG system, and you can actually end up worse off if you fail. If you fail, the level of the upgrade can go down from what it was, and for some items they can be destroyed, so you can end up significantly worse off. This upgrade system, this RNG upgrade system, put a lot of people off the game at first. Once again, they have improved this by improving the player marketplace and the ability to buy and sell between different players. If you don't want to engage in this RNG system, you can just buy the gear off other players for silver. It's worth noting that the life skill gear in the game works the same way. So if you want to craft, you'll need to upgrade that crafting gear or buy the upgraded crafting gear from other players. As a result, the acquisition of gear does feel different from other games. So if the gear grind, the traditional gear grind of hunting best in slot gear from a given world boss or raid or dungeon, that's something that really motivates you and is very important to you, I would caution you a little bit, as that's simply not the way the game works. It's all about upgrading that gear and either engaging in that RNG system and trying to be lucky, or by just saving up the silver through another means and buying it off another player. I next want to talk about the energy and the contribution point systems up in the top left. We're going to start off with energy. Firstly, I'm only going to talk very briefly about both of these, because you could very easily create an hour-long video on both. There's an awful lot to them, and they're very complex. But starting off with energy, very simplistically, you can think of it as a resource you can use to gather items. You can use it for a lot more than that, but that's a good mental model to start off with. And at first, as a brand new player, you're typically going to use your energy to gain knowledge when talking to new NPCs. Knowledge is a system in the game where you can gain knowledge by doing a whole host of activity, talking to new NPCs, exploring new things, killing new enemies. You gain knowledge by doing this, and the more knowledge you have, the higher total energy points you have. Now, your energy points regenerate every 3 minutes. If you have a premium buff on, you get 3 energy back every 3 minutes. If you don't have that buff, you gain 1 energy back per 3 minutes. And I'd recommend you think of it as a mechanism of gathering at first. Whenever you do something active, like chopping down wood, or mining, or gathering herbs and shrubs, or milking cows, all of these things will typically use energy. Now, if you start reading guides about energy, it will start telling you about all sorts of places you haven't been, and all about how to be efficient with your energy. All I'd say is that if it's full, just use it on something. I used it to milk cows at first. It's not the most efficient use of energy, but it got me milk. Milk's always in demand, and I could use it to make some bread. One thing I'll say is I was a little concerned at first because it can feel a bit mobile game-ish with a resource that you can only use and slowly recovers and all the rest of it. And there is an element of that for the simple reason that if you have a premium buff, your energy rate triples, and there are items you can do to recover your energy. However, it doesn't feel that scummy, for the simple reason that energy has reasonably niche uses in the game in comparison to everything else you can do that doesn't require energy. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. What I would say, however, is that it is the first system in the game we've covered that encourages you to never turn off the game, for the simple reason that it only recovers if you're in the game. So if you don't have the buff, and you spend all of your energy, and you have 300 energy, you will need 900 minutes in-game to fully recover. That's 15 hours. 15 hours where you need to have the game running. Now, if you like the idea of a game which fully immerses you and wants you to be involved all the time, this could be a good thing. If you hate the idea about a game encouraging you to always be on, this might put you off slightly. Just bear in mind that this is one of a couple of different systems that we're going to explore, which heavily incentivizes AFK playing and never turning the game off. Next, contribution points. I'm going to try and be as high level as I can be here, because there's an awful lot to it. But very simply, you gain contribution points by completing quests. Side quests give you contribution XP, and that gives you more points. This makes quests always valuable to do, because it always gives you these contribution points. Contribution points are points you invest. You typically invest them in the map. You can also invest them in borrowing gear and borrowing fences. These are examples on the map of fences I've borrowed, and you can use them for farming. I'm growing some peppers in this one here. The main use of contribution points is investing in nodes. Each of these circles on the map is a node. You can invest your contribution points to unlock that node, which can give you passive buffs to the drop rate if you're fighting monsters there. But you can also then gain access to these sub-nodes, which you can invest more contribution points in. Here we can see chicken meat and potatoes. And if you've invested your contribution points in all of these, you can then send workers out to these nodes to gather that resource for you for free. Now, workers require lodging. Each city has lots of houses that you can spend your contribution points to unlock, and there's lots of things you can use houses for. There's a whole bunch of complex production systems like shipbuilding and tool making, all the rest of it. But firstly, Workers need lodgings, which you can turn these residences into. If you have lodgings, you can hire workers, you can send them out to your nodes. You can also use these houses for storage. Each city has a local storage, a local bank, and you can increase the size of that bank by investing in these points. You can also turn them into your own personal houses, which you can not only make look nice, but is important for crafting. Cooking and alchemy, these things require doing that in your own residence. So the idea is that you can build a great big worker empire that stretches the entire map. Now this is where I'd say don't necessarily go looking at guides, because it will teach you how to build a massive worker empire. As a new player, that's no use whatsoever, because it requires you to have uncovered the entire map and all of the nodes, so really don't worry about it too much. All I'd say is that it's worth pointing out that there is value in connecting distant nodes together. If you're a continual line of distant nodes, it can be beneficial when selling certain items. A good example of this is fish. If you're fishing in a node which you've unlocked, and you have a continual line of invested in nodes to a different area, you can sell them, for example here in Glish, to the tradesperson, and you can get much more money from them because it's much further away. But if there wasn't a continual line of invested in nodes, you'd sell them for a tiny fraction of the price. That's the basic of the worker empire. You get some people to make some stuff in one corner of the world and you transport it to another and you sell it for a massive premium. As a new player, I really wouldn't worry about it too much. Just like energy, if you have the points, spend them, invest them, play around with them. Workers require beer to regain stamina, but it's very easy to make huge amounts of beer. So effectively, the workers are free. Even if they're making things for you that are relatively cheap, still better than nothing, right? And it can be a really nice introduction to the life skill elements of the game, because you can be gathering pumpkins, for example, or you can get some workers to gather copper, and you can then ask yourselves, what am I going to do with this? And that can be an introduction as life skills as you begin processing that and using it for crafting and professions and life skills in order to make something better. As life skills can be quite daunting, it can be quite a nice targeted introduction to the game. Now, it's worth pointing out that workers are another aspect of the game that encourage you to never turn it off, for the simple reason that they only work when you're online. And as you can see with my workers here, the amount of time they take to complete a job is really long, several hours often. Which means if you have the game running, your workers will keep on working, and if they have enough stamina, they will work forever. So even if you're doing nothing at all, if you're just sitting AFK, your workers will continually be making things for you. This is another way the game encourages you to never turn it off, because your workers can always be doing something in the background. When it comes to contribution points, and the node system, and this entire almost different game, it's something that's really exciting. For me, it's a big selling point of the game, but it is very big, very complex, very deep, and it can be very intimidating. So as you're beginning off as a new player, play around with it, invest in some nodes, have some fun, do some things, learn, use it as an excuse into life skills, but really don't worry about it too much. Wait until you've more fully explored the map and unlocked all the nodes before you try to build your own worker empire. The final area of the game we'll discuss are your life skills. As a sandbox MMO, you can do whatever you want in the game, and the game will reward you for doing so. If you want to spend your entire time fishing, go for it. That's the point. You spend your time doing what you want. It's a whole world that you can live in. Now, there's pretty much something for everyone with your life skills. Gathering, fishing, hunting, cooking, alchemy, processing, training, trading, farming, sailing, bartering. All of these are life skills. The main quest will signpost you to these, but you won't have to do them. It's totally up to you to get involved as much or as little as you want. You could focus your time to become a master fisherman. You might want to dip your toes into all of them, or you might not want to touch life skills at all. It's totally up to you. You can do what you want. All I'd say is that each of these will take hundreds of hours to master. Each of these is a game in and of itself. Now, regarding your first couple of weeks, depending on how heavily you get involved in life skills, you can expect that it's the main vehicle the game introduces you to AFK and what your character can do AFK to be beneficial. If you're saying to yourself, what can I do whilst my workers are working? What can I do whilst my energy is recovering? Well, most of the answers come to life skills, although it's worth pointing out that you can do a great many things in this game AFK. Good example of this is the fishing I'm doing right now. I just caught that fish without touching the keyboard. The game caught it for me. I could have actively caught it myself and I would have done so faster, but if I left it a couple of minutes more, the game caught it for me. I can almost guarantee that everyone in front of me here is AFK. Very typically, people will leave themselves fishing overnight and leave the game running. This is the overarching experience you'll gain from Black Desert, is that it is a second world, a world that it wants you to live in all the time, and it's beneficial to have the game running all the time. Now, this can be very attractive to some people, knowing that you can always be productive even when you're away from keyboard, and it can be very attractive escapism to have this whole complete world where there's always so much to do. For others, it can be a great big turnoff. They want to be able to play the game for a couple of hours each day or a couple of hours a week and to be competitive. Well, unfortunately in Black Desert, that's just simply not the case. The game really wants you to play all the time. Whether or not you're okay with this or not is something that you'll need to discover for yourself. We've talked about an awful lot today, but the one word I would use to describe Black Desert Online is depth. The game is huge, the game is deep, there's so much to see and there's so much to master, and it's personally that aspect which I absolutely love. I love it when I can feel myself as a person growing and discovering new things and exploring new things and learning. When that progression is tied with satisfying in-game progression, that's just the cherry on top, and that's what Black Desert Online does so well. Even when you've been playing the game for hundreds of hours, there's still going to be so much new to see, new to experience, new things to master. I really hope that this video has given you a good impression as to what you might experience in your first couple of weeks of playing the game, and whether or not it might be a good fit for you. I really appreciate it if you've managed to get to the end of the video. This is actually my second video I've produced on the channel, and I really would welcome you to get involved, to be part of our very small and budding community here. I'll put a link down to my Twitch down in the description below. I'm streaming during the week and I'll get a more structured streaming schedule out soon. And I really want to see over the coming months if we can build a little bit of our community for ourselves here. As always, happy adventuring guys, and I'll see you next time.